I'm here in Bombay, Mumbai as we call it now, to introduce to you a very special person, Mr. Romesh Sobti, the Chief Executive Officer of IndusInd Bank. IndusInd Bank is one of India's leading private sector organizations, formed in India and managed by Indians, running a business which is unique. Corporate India, with whom you've dealt with literally from your days from State Bank in remote areas to ANZ Grindlays to ABN AMRO and now as the head of IndusInd. Is corporate India really creating what we call CORP2020? That's the question I have for you. Are we creating companies whose goals are aligned with society, who want to understand their externalities and want to measure them and manage them in a way that's positive for society, who, as a matter of routine, train people who are their employees and create human capital for society, or companies who, as a matter of routine, create alternative communities?
See, I'm hard put to find a few corporates who would fit all the attributes. So I see a lot of nascency in each one of these attributes. Now, some have progressed and have run faster. For instance, human capital creation. The IT companies led the way on human capital creation. The whole situation of proposition of creating wealth and distributing wealth, for instance, right? That has caught on.
Right.
Other things of aligning with the goals of society, etc. Different corporates are at different stage of this thing. So you can't, club the whole corporate India into one sort of this thing, saying that all of them are pointing the same way in all the vectors that you mentioned.
Which one or two companies would you feel have created that community?
You look at large steel townships. So if you were to look at a Reliance refinery, the Patalganga project, or Indian Oil's projects around this thing, where they are located in isolated areas, away from urban India, right? So you've got to create a community. So you must have schools and roads and hospitals, and also healthcare and all those sort of things, right? So those sort of propositions have happened. But does a corporate in urban India follow all these by compulsion? Right? The compulsion could be you have rampant unionism, right? Unionism makes you mitigate some of these factors by doing community this thing, right?
Community development.
So who does it out of the goodness of his heart?
Yes.
Right? We don't have that sort of a thing. So you have isolated pockets of these sort of things happening, but you don't have across the board.
How far can that go? I mean, can that create a change in the way that corporations work today? Can it actually create the corporation that will automatically engender a green economy?
It's not going to happen automatically. So I think a combination of factors has got to work. In this country, regulatory intervention has always worked.
Right.
Right? So, whether you talk of corporates, we were discussing corporates over leveraging. This country didn't allow that. You know why? Regulatory intervention. In the good old days, 25 years ago, how much credit you would give to a corporate was determined regulatorily. Need-based capital. Right? Regulations work in this country.
So, we've seen the lack of limits to corporate leverage as one of the driving problems, if you like, one of the core issues which creates massive crises. Has India and its regulations, has India and its regulators managed to limit leverage?
See, India fortunately didn't fall in the trap of the belief that a free market regulates itself. That trap we didn't fall into. Way back, 25 years ago, I still remember when we were young corporate bankers, they had a scheme called the Credit Monitoring Agency and a Credit Monitoring Scheme.
Right, the CMA scheme.
Where you would not lend to a corporate except in a consortium. Consortium means you put an umbrella, you appoint a lead bank who does a need-based assessment of the working capital needs of the company.
Right.
Right. So you go to the balance sheet and say, these are current liabilities, current assets. What is the gap? I will fund 75% of the gap.
Okay.
That used to be at one stage cleared by the Reserve Bank of India. Right. So you did an assessment, sent it to the Reserve Bank of India. It came back and was apportioned between the banks. No free market stuff.
No free market. In other words, one bank knew the total amount of exposure of a company and knew the total leverage that the company
all banks knew.
All banks, in fact, all banks knew.
So there was data sharing.
Right.
Anything that happened to the corporate was then shared across the thing through the lead banks. The basic premise of this scheme was need-based financing, right? So that limited leveraging per se. Not only that, there was transaction-based auditing.
Wow, okay.
You disbursed a loan of rupees 80 million as a term loan. Where did it go?
Okay.
Whose account did you send it to? What was the end use of that thing, right? Now, as India evolved, right, and bankers became more globalized in India, we started criticizing this scheme.
Of course.
Right? That, you know, this is not the way a free market works. I decide how much to lend to you. We've gone through a phase of over 15 years where the consortium remains, but you had the option of working in a multiple banking arrangement, right? I think a strong case has come back. Everybody now believes that that is the way to go. So one, needs-based lending. Two, all banks thinking alike under one umbrella.
Right.
Right. So there was a bit of micromanagement of the leveraging.
Correct.
It still happens today. It still happens today. Auditors come in from Reserve Bank of India and look at transactions. You sanctioned this loan, where did it go? Right? Now that creates a mentality amongst the working bankers. I've got to also see.
So the purpose of the loan is transparently stated.
Correct.
The total quantum of the borrowing is known and shared, in fact, by the consortium, as you call it, consortium of bankers. The lending has a degree of control, and that limits leverage.
So that's the regulatory intervention. So in this country, that has worked very well. There's a strong case for this to work around the world. So the free market fallacies, you know, which have been the downfall of large banks, have not happened here. This may be micromanagement, right? But you do it over 20 years, it becomes part of your DNA.
What do you feel are the chances of limiting leverage, consortium banking, and transaction-based and end-use-based control of lending introduced in other countries? Are you sort of confident that this could work elsewhere?
India is so varied in its needs and so geographically dispersed, right? That if it works in India, it should work anywhere else. You don't have booms and bursts here.
Yes.
You have ups and downs.
That's right.
What the Indian regulator has sort of led the way in and pioneered is also the creation of reserves.
Right.
Right? We have the highest reserve requirements in the world today.
That's right.
And we are impounded on our liabilities on reserves. They are statutory reserves. So the whole banking, the global banking community is now talking of creating reserves. Right? So Basel III says a counter-cyclical reserve, or this sort of thing, you know, capital conservation. We have the reserves. They're as much as 31% of our liabilities. Right? And I think the people around the world, the regulators around the world are saying, well, maybe there's some good in that model.
Some value in that model. Romesh, it's often said that banks should be more careful and should be more conscious about sustainability issues when they are making loans to corporations or taking exposure to corporations. Can one have sustainability filters? Do you think this works?
You see, if it works if there's uniformity of application. So you've got to level the playing field. Right? To that extent, therefore, it has to be an imposition of some sort. Voluntary adoption is a very slow process. And competitive instincts will not allow that to happen automatically. Right? So it's got to be an imposition. So these filters will only happen when they are applied uniformly across the board.
And you're convinced that voluntary measures cannot really achieve a green economy?
Well, look, over time, the voluntary measures will be driven by the belief of good ecology being good economics.
Yes.
Right? Then slowly there will be convergence. It could be 2, 3, 4 decades before that convergence happens.
But do we have 2, 3, 4 decades?
Yeah, that's the whole issue.
Right.
So if you want to fast forward it a little bit, I think there has to be a combination of one showing the mirror saying good ecology is good economics. Right? That's one. Two, if you don't do it, I penalize you.
Yes.
So there's a regulatory imposition, and the voluntary part is, look, it's good for my business. Excellent. My bottom line benefits. You know.
Ramesh, you've really given us food for thought. It's been great being with you here in Mumbai, in your offices, and hearing about how India actually provides an interesting example of limiting leverage, and hearing also about how the public sector can play a role towards creating the impetus for a green economy and forming CORP2020.